Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video diving into screenshots I took from the first gameplay stream covering Ways of War, which is the next expansion for Age of Wonders 4 and is coming out November 5th. Just like I've done with previous gameplay streams by the devs, I went through and took screenshots of all the interesting numbers and mechanics that popped up for a few seconds so that we can take a closer look at them together. I will have timestamps below so that if you want to jump to any particular topic or concept, you can do so. I will also be posting these images to the official Age of Wonders 4 forum, so if you want to look at them with me, you can use the link in the description below. Important disclaimer, a lot of the numbers we will be looking at today are from relatively early versions of Age of Wonders 4, and the devs recently announced that there will be at least 2 more DLCs after Ways of War, so these numbers are likely to change quite significantly. So as you can see here, I've got a couple of the more interesting screenshots right at the top. I have organized it so a lot of the things having to do with level ups and hero skills are in one section together, but I thought I might as well just bring some of the most interesting stuff right to the top here. Like, for example, near the end of the stream, they showed off this new unit, the Shade, which is the one that does the combat role in the trailer. And it looks like the throw shadow dagger must be the attack that you see the combat roll. This says it throws a projectile at a target. The other one is a fatal strike, so a melee strike. And this will blind units from range 4 and has relatively high damage. It cannot be used within, zone of control. It's like a lot of other ranged attacks. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how this unit actually plays with some of the other changes that they were showing off, like how if you go into foliage now, that will apply slowed, which makes skirmisher units a lot better. The slippery effect on this shade unit, or is it slippery? I think it's actually swift. I think the swift ability makes it so that the unit cannot be slowed, so they're able to get around bushes and trees more easily to get into position to use attacks like this throw shadow dagger a little bit more easily than other units that have ranged attacks like battle mage or a just a regular old archer unit is going to have a little bit harder time maneuvering the battlefield, and I love that. I'm really glad that they showed that off nice and early. We also got to see that there's quite a bit more sources of dispel. I think I moved the other ones a little bit further below because they're less exciting than this single action remove 2 negative status effects on that unit in particular. We'll talk more about this unit later on when we get to the roster portion of this video, but I also wanted to show off that we got to see a little bit about this calamity tone. This appeared for less than a second. I felt like Tom was speaking directly to me because he said, "Get your screenshot buttons ready," and I was very ready. We only got to see the summon Calamity Dragon spell for a little bit, and what's really interesting about this one in particular is this targets owned non-ruined provinces. So you have to target your own provinces and not one that you've already used the spell on, because that will get rid of the ruins. Um, or that they will already have ruins there. I guess you could probably terraform to get rid of the ruins to allow you to keep reusing this spell on the same province, but that will just require more effort and more steps to get there. The idea is you use this on friendly terrain. It makes it ruins and desolate, and then you will summon a calamity dragon, which looks generally pretty powerful. Is probably about as strong as some other tier 4s, maybe slightly stronger because it costs you some of your economy to get there. I'm seeing that it also costs 300 mana and 300 casting points, which is probably the real limitation to how many of these you'll be able to get on the field. You won't be able to get them very quickly because that's a lot of casting points. Um, we don't know what Force Mask of Calamity is or Ghost Firestorm, but I believe at one point they did show off the not the Calamity Dragon, but the Prosperity Dragon, which has something like a Mask of Calamity, but it I think makes your unit stronger instead of like probably hurting enemy units a little bit. We also have the names of some of the things you can do in this tome. We have Desecrate Land, Comet of Calamity, Ritual of Calamity, Summon the Thing, Accursed Projectiles, Accursed Armors. So I assume this probably applies Ghostfire when you shoot things. Accursed Armors probably applies Ghostfire when your own units get hurt, because I think that was an interaction we saw with a new Ghostfire Ogre or an Accursed Ogre. I got a screenshot of that that will show off later. But yeah, this probably desecrates the land or turns it into desolate or ruins and gives you something in return, right? You probably get something out of that. I'm not sure what the comet does. The comet event in other Paradox games usually can be good or bad. It could be a bit of a risk. Um, this Honor Blade looks incredibly strong. People were comparing its damage potential, that's 30 plus 2 on just like a base unit, to the Earth Titan, a tier 5 Titan can do a little bit less damage before the charge bonuses. Of course, you don't get the charge bonuses on defensive strike, but it does put you in defense mode. That is pretty nice. Um, but this can be 20% more damage per hex traveled, so that would take you to higher base damage after moving a little bit. But it is definitely worth taking into consideration. There's also Earth and Fury. This will give you plus 20% damage against immobilized or slowed units. So it's pretty easy to boost this damage up higher than the defensive strikes. It just looks like a lot, maybe too much, but I mean, I won't really know until I play around with it. Um, yeah, here's the little dragon that I wanted to show off quickly. We have a few things that they showed off with the Prosperity Dragon. We got to see Radiant Strike. This one is just going to do a lot of damage for full action at range. I want to say that says 8 or 6. Damage target unit, adjacent enemies take 50% damage. It's a little bit grainy, but I think that says it's range 8. That's pretty big range. This is like the Eldritch Sovereign's Rebuke, or it's like a range 1 melee strike that they can do if somebody does get up in their face, and they're not just able to use the Radiant Spike because that's blocked by Zona Control. We also got to see the Mask of Prosperity, which I mentioned not too long ago. Um, linked target unit will transfer the damage at a 35% reduction to this unit. This unit has Grace, so it will heal up relatively quickly at the start of each turn. This unit and the other unit will gain Grace. I think if you don't have Grace, you also get Grace. So it's going to be a unit that can keep itself and others alive pretty efficiently. There's also this nice full action thing that just makes it so all friendly units gain Grace and they lose one negative status effect. Right, and like I mentioned not too long ago, this guy has Inner Grace, which says at the start of its turn, the unit gains Grace if it doesn't already have it. And I'm curious if you can only get one thing of Grace from Inner Grace and the Mask of Prosperity, or if that actually will trigger the Inner Grace first and then give you the second stack of Grace from the Mask of Prosperity. I think each stack of Grace, I should have a screenshot of this, I think it gives you 10 HP when a unit is struck, and it can stack up to 5 times. So you can actually get like 50 HP when your guy is attacked, and if they aren't missing 50 HP, that's kind of like a waste of the grace stacks, but it still sounds incredibly useful, incredibly good. Kind of reminds me of the Last Stand and other of the um, Oath, oh, not Oathsworn, but I want to say Oathbound, the Star Kings in Age of Wonders Planetfall, they had the ability to heal and keep their guys on the battlefield very efficiently. And it's neat that they share a similar name to the Oathsworn, and there seems to be some overlap, uh, yeah, similar mechanics to what we saw in that DLC. I did mention earlier that there are more sources of dispel, but what's really interesting about this one in particular is that it's coming on the cultural support unit on the new Oathsworn culture, and none of the other baseline cultures have the ability to dispel on that support. There are supports that you can get that have better dispels, that have AoE dispels that remove all status effects, but those are tier 3 units. One is the Nymph, which comes from the Tome of Fertility, a tier 2 tome, and the other one is a fairy, which you can get through Ancient Wonders. So both of those are generally better than this unit. It's available to everybody, but it's something that you won't have at the beginning of the game. Whereas this one, it can remove all negative status effects on only a single target. It's not quite as good, but it is really nice to have the ability to say, hey, I don't want my units pacified or insane, or one of the many very tricky stats effects to play around. Like if a unit's frozen and you can remove that and get 3 attacks, it can really shift the way the rest of the battle will play out. It also gives stats protection, but that's pretty minor compared to the removing stats effects. It also has a very nice heal, a very nice big heal, which we'll get more to when we talk about the roster. But I did want to mention that we also have this other early source of dispel, which is in a tier 1 tome. This says it removes all negative stats effects once again on a single unit. So very, very nice. If you aren't playing the oathsworn, I think this new tome sounds like a pretty good option for you to get a source of dispel at the beginning of the game. Now, we're starting to get into the parts that I find less super interesting that I pulled up to the top. I did bring the bamboo scenery, but there isn't much to say other than that's cool, that's neat. We have a lot of screenshots about the ambition system, so I did kind of want to rewind and say I love the way they promoted the release date for Ways of War. They basically were posting a lot of images with these symbols on them, and people were able to unpack from the first day that we were given 2 letters, M and E. Basically, the 5, I think, is telling you um, where to place the letter, and the 4 is telling you which letter in this word from this image inside the portal you're going to pick out. So we got M from Gremlin, E from Fertility, E from Berserk, B from Subjugation, R from Constrictor, F from Faith, V from Overseer, N from Artificing, O from Bastion, B from Oblivion. And then when you put that all together, you get November 5. I mean, I love that. I thought that was really, really cool of them to do. And I think one other thing I missed in my last video that I made was that there's a couple more images here on the Steam workshop than I initially saw. You get to see this is the warg, the white warg. This must be the Graceful Judge because this looks like the blessed dragon. And I believe I missed this dragon. That would be the calamity dragon in my initial reaction to this Ways of War content, the new Ways of War. Yeah, it's called Ways of War. I just have to check the title. Sometimes I think, is it Way of Wars? No, it's Ways of War. All right, getting back to where we were. We were just, I think, getting to. Wait a minute, I skipped past this really cool one. Critical momentum's awesome. Yeah, well, this is getting close. This is pretty related to what I want to talk about with heroes and the way they're going to be changed. So this is something that you can get pretty late on in your level up, which is in the level up tree, or maybe it's not super late. It's about halfway down, so it may be something you can get around mid game, but not immediately. This is going to make it so every critical hit that you deal will heal the hero 10 HP and give them hasten, which is generally just a very good thing to have on your melee guys because it gives them a second retaliation and lets them move further. And I believe there may even be something else that comes along with the hasten stack. Yeah, that I think is enough for us to scroll down past the dispels and the scenery to get back to ambitions. So now when you are creating your ruler, you get a list of options to make it so that when you accomplish certain goals, certain ambitions, then your guy gets, like, I want to say, better governor bonuses and maybe a boost to their ability to do combat slightly. Yeah, so I think this is what it's telling you you get from the ambitions. This is still a new system to me, and I'm not sure if I completely understand the ambitions. Not only does your ruler have ambitions, but every hero that you recruit will have ambitions. And I think they mentioned that if you have trouble accomplishing their ambitions, then they'll get the ability to get other ones. But I believe they took Conqueror for this one. If we go down here, we can see that they are, yeah, Conqueror. So when they win a siege battle, they get 100 renown. That's repeatable. When we win a siege battle against a throne city, they get 200 renown, and I think it costs about two. Yeah, it says it right here. I think it says 200 renown in order to level up, to go from level 1 to level 3, and then you get to see some of the things you get between the different levels here. This says at first level 20 food. At the second level, new pobs require less food in order to grow. I think this would be just in the city where your guy has been stationed. Then it says Wizard Tower city structures grant +2 more to +2 Imperium per turn, which can actually lead to a lot of Imperium if you have those buildings built up in your city. But yeah, I think by the time you get to that governor thing, you probably should have a few. This then says at the last level, units that are recruited get +1 rank. That seems pretty good. I think they removed a lot of things that add +1 rank, but I could see this being nice for later in the game when your guys are they require more experience in order to rank up, as well as early in the game. If you're able to unlock this relatively early, then just getting like legend rank tier 1 units is very nice, very powerful. I did a little video on that at one point if you wanted to go back and check that out, but I think they removed some of those interactions. If we wanted to look a little bit more at some of the things that popped up for a second, we have privateer, which is like focusing on water infestation, clearing water infestations. It seems to say, did I cut out the bottom of this? Is there more to this image? Doesn't seem like it. Um, Reward. Oh yeah, just winning a naval battle will give them 35 points, and then clearing out the water infestation that gives them 100 renowned and ambusher. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds to say if you do this, you get something kind of like a free level up. If you complete the major ambition, I think you get something like the ability to summon in the Devastator Sphere, or Trainer, I think makes your guys rank up a little bit faster. Delver is saying you can get Unstoppable Leader for basically clearing out the underground infestations, or you can get a little bit of points from excavating. I might try this one out. I think this will be really fun once we get to see the giants. They're supposed to be underground from what I remember, so I think yeah, this could be pretty cool, pretty fun to play around with. Wizard King renown level ups will be different than champions. I think that's what I heard them say, but I didn't get a screenshot of that. This does say godir governor, which seems to indicate that might be different than a dragon ruler or an eldritch sovereign or wizard king. The combat bonus you get from the governors or these levels is basically morale. I think you get +5 morale after you get to level 2. This is an additional +5 unit morale instead of just +5 unit morale. So I think that would take you to basically 10 across the board when this guy's in a fight, or maybe it's just his stack that gets the boost to morale. Yeah, it says army bonus, so I think it'd just be the units in his own army, not all friendly units in the battle. We have the class of ritualist, and we have a class of defender that I have some screenshots for, and the warrior. So this actually has to do with like what type of things you can equip and what you get available when you rank up once you get enough experience to buy the things that make your guys better overall, or like give them extra abilities. Some of them give them extra stats, some of them give them extra abilities. But yeah, for the ritualist, they can only use these 3 weapon types. They can use magic orb weapons, the staff weapons, and they actually have the ability to use the eldritch relic weapons, which I hadn't seen until just now. That's really interesting that they can use eldritch weapons, because they used to just be for the eldritch rulers, and that was very limiting. They're pretty good weapons. They usually have a lot of range as well as a decent melee strike. And um, yeah, I actually am really curious to see how other people feel about having uh, that being something any ruler can use, or rather ritualist rulers can use. The next thing we got here was, I think from when they were recruiting their rulers, we got to see Fearmonger, which gives intimidating if you complete the major thing, which is win a battle where 5 enemies routed. That sounds pretty challenging. I think routing enemies can be a little bit harder than just outright killing them, because you have to drop their morale, not their HP, and it's just like a different thing that people pay attention to. But I think given the amount of renown you get here, it would probably be worth doing that in manual combat and in single player at the very least. I don't know if I'd make people in multiplayer sit through me doing a manual combat to accomplish this goal. That doesn't seem fun or fair, but it is interesting that that's in there for the single player people. We have an industrious governor, which looks very nice. This looks very cool. Being able to get that much extra production on each of your quarries should actually stack up relatively quickly. And then you get stability on those quarries, and then city structures cost less gold, and then city structures give you gold. This seems like something where if I had this ruler, that city's only getting quarries. Like I don't know why I'd build much else other than quarries, um, unless it's already been built for me and maybe there's special province improvements, and then I might keep them. Dominator says that if you can recruit or raise a tier 4 or 5 unit after combat, then you get, I guess, the ability to dominate other units in the future. This is probably a really hard one to accomplish, and then when you do accomplish it, it makes the game a lot easier because you have this really powerful skill. It's almost like you just win once you have that, but um, it might be a little bit trickier than that depending on the map you're playing on and the settings that you have. So that was our last screenshot that had to do with ambitions, or at least the last one that I remember. I think the next few ones will be focusing on the signature skill choices you get when you get to level 4, level 8, level 12, and level 16. After that, we have, I think, some that actually explore more of this tree and the things you can pick when you get those level up points from just going from like level 5 to level 6. So they did mention that your empire affinity dictates your signature skill costs, and right here at the very first level, at level 4, it only requires one affinity point for things to become available. I'm not sure what you need at level 8, but I would imagine needing 3 affinity points or maybe more would make a lot of sense for that one. And then I have to imagine if you need affinity points for level 12 signature skill and the level 16 signature skill, it probably um, scales up a bit like tomes, which is you need like 2 more affinity in order to get the next higher tier tome. So it might be like you need 3 points here, 5 points here, 7 points at the next one. I wouldn't be terribly surprised. But since they have order affinity, chaos affinity, and materium affinity, they have chaos, materium, and order as their choices. And when you decide on one of them, they basically give you 2 things that you can pick on the left, and I believe they cost 1 level up point, just like anything else in these trees. After you have picked the the type of initiate your guy is going to be, there is a free passive that comes along with this. I believe there is something that's kind of like the way signature skills used to work. It used to be when you get to level 4, you just get like a free, really strong ability. Now the free thing that you get, kind of like free, right? It doesn't cost a level up point. So that this benefit that you get for the chaos initiate is you get extra crit chance on all the units, all the non-hero units in that army. Very important, because if you just put all of your heroes in one stack, then it's going to be harder to take advantage of the leadership bonuses you get at these signature skills. Um, and you won't have as many armies being led by heroes applying these bonuses. So I think in general they're trying to encourage people to make leaders more into one an army, and they lead the stack. They're actual proper leaders versus just units that are in the army. Um, but at the same time, they wanted to give people that power fantasy of if you feel like putting a bunch of heroes in a stack, they are going to still be relatively good. They still have the ability to do a lot of damage. Now, the Materium one gives you extra defense, and that seems pretty good to me. I mean, you might be facing somebody who does magic damage, and then defense isn't super valuable to you. And in that situation, you may want to pick up a bit of order affinity so that you can take the initiate of order. I could see it being valuable enough to wait to take these signature skills until you have the exact initiate that helps you for combats that are coming up in the near future, and that might mean that you have to take a tome before you actually pick this. And of course, there is, I think, the reset hero level ups that would help you deal with that. But after you've done that the first time, it costs quite a bit of Imperium, or at least that's how it used to work in the previous version. We haven't seen that interaction in a gameplay stream with the new Ways of War content or the patch that you would be playing on with this stuff. I think, yeah, the free patch should work the same way as what everybody else gets with Ways of War. All right, so we've talked about how you can get extra defense, extra resistance, and extra crit chance, but we haven't really talked about the little things. And we got to see, I think, 5 of them in the gameplay stream. We got to see Inspiring Killer. Nothing surprising here. This works, I think, the way it used to. Double morale bonus to itself and allies when killing an enemy. Searing Strike seems better to me. This makes it so that your base attacks do +2 fire damage, and that you get extra 20% damage against targets that are burning. The effects are increased for non-repeating attacks. So if you put that on a mage lock hero, somebody who has a single attack versus a repeating attack, that'll be, I think, +4 damage and maybe +40% extra damage. It says effects are increased. That might just be the damage that's increased, not the percentage that gets added on top. But I can imagine that being very good if it does work that way. We also have Purging Strengths, which is one of the things you can choose for Materium. This seems pretty nice, pretty strong. Base attacks have a 60% chance of removing a positive status effect. I know there was Purging Arrows, which worked this way with ranged attacks, but I think that this should work for melee attacks. If you wanted to have a melee hero that does Purging, I think that should be theoretically possible. And then the next thing Materium gets, which I love the look of this one. This just seems really fun, and I don't remember it being in the game beforehand. It says at the start of each turn, you gain 2 defense and 2 resistance until the start of next turn or until the unit moves. So it basically encourages you to stand still and tank a little bit. I think this could be good on a Mage Lock hero because like they're supposed to stand still, but the problem with that is that he can't shoot things that are standing next to them. And one of the main ways that this will be useful is resisting damage from melee attacks who would be, standing next to you. But of course, it does help mitigate the damage from range attacks pretty efficiently, as well as if you wanted to put this on a defender hero, you could have him take a lot of melee strikes. I just wouldn't do it with a mage lock hero or somebody who needs to be out of range of an enemy in order to use their attacks. Zone of control can really mess up the mage locks, and um, yeah, if you don't have a way to teleport away or sprint away, that can be problematic. The next thing you can that they showed off, they didn't show off the last one, the Shield of Faith. The next one we have here is Condemning Strikes. You basically gain Zeal, which I think is a little bit of extra spirit damage. It might be +1 for repeating attacks, +2 on non-repeating attacks. But then you also have the chance to apply Condemned, and these effects are increased for non-repeating attacks. So I think that percentage chance should be higher for non-repeating attacks, but I could be wrong. I know that there's a lot of interesting things that you can put on your dragon, for example. So this could be a good way to apply condemn. You can also, I think, apply distracted through the dragon's AoE. So yeah, like if you apply condemn, distracted, and a bunch of other things, that's a lot of nice synergy. Next, we have some of the you get to see basically how these options would play out in the level up tree. They took the chaos one so they can take searing strikes or they can take inspiring killer. As I said earlier, I'd probably just take searing strikes. And since it looks like to me in the bottom right, this is saying it still costs a point, I think it's a choice between one of these or one of the other bright circles over here. There's also like these ones in the middle that don't have like a circle outline. They have kind of like a diamond outline, and some of them are a little bit lighter, and some of them look more like an ability you would see on at the bottom of the screen that you'd click to do something like a sprint or something like that. In fact, I think this is their replacement of sprint that now heals and gives you like one more point of movement, which I think is probably um, slightly better than the way sprint used to be, but it's different. That's the big thing. We'll get to that pretty soon. The champions are all about support according to Tom, and I think they want to change the stuff on the left here so that not everybody gets command. I think command was something at one point that everybody had access to, but they wanted to make that specifically for champions because champions needed something to make them more competitive. And I think whatever they put here for the other things probably won't be as good as saying, hey, target a friendly non-hero unit. You now have your action points back. It's really nice to be able to move a unit with an AoE forward and then give them the ability to throw their AoE down in a place that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to. So I think this is going to be really, really helpful and really interesting in certain situations, especially since it appears like something that you can get relatively early in the game and therefore should be in a lot of combats. Uh, there is this coordinated command which comes into play later, and it is incompatible with decisive command. So there's a little lock symbol there between this and the thing to the left of it. You have to choose between one of them. This one basically will not only reset the action points on one unit, it will then jump that effect to one additional target within 3 hexes. I wonder if that could work on the hero casting it, if you can like reset a unit and itself, because that could be kind of funny. That could be really, really funny. It does have cooldown too. Um, I don't think you can use a weaver on this to make it so you can just keep resetting or anything, but that looks really neat. And there's probably some interesting interactions I haven't considered yet. Foraging training is pretty self-explanatory. You just get more health passively in between the strategic turns, so this will help you keep your units just topped off and ready to go fight others um, more often. We have endurance training, which is I think the same as what it used to be in the game, but it looks like it's maybe accessible earlier. I think you can get this like around level 2 or 3 maybe, but I could be missing something about how these things work together. I think if you take the thing above it, you could maybe get this on level 2. And the thing above it is not experience leader, not logistics training, but something else, right? Did I not get a good screenshot of that one? No, it's the forging training. So if you take the forging training, then you can get the, um, gosh, this one, endurance training, super good. I could see that being actually worth doing in certain builds. If you're taking a lot of combats and you need to be able to heal, and uh, this will allow you to take advantage of that healing better. Yeah, that could be pretty cool. Experience leader, I love. It's something you can take. It looks like at the beginning of the game, and then it'll allow your units that evolve to evolve a little bit more easily and quickly. Logistics training looks like it's tied underneath experience leader. I feel like it used to be the other way around, where it was easier to get logistics training than it was to get experience leader. I like this change. I like this change a lot. I think that logistics training wasn't super valuable if you took it early, and it had more play in the mid to late game. And experience leader was better in the early game. So it was interesting that this was something you could get later, and this was something you could get earlier, because it felt like it should have been the other way, and it looks like it might be the other way around now. We have defensive formation here, which says while army leader, all non-hero units in the army get extra defense and resistance when adjacent to friendly units. Not just adjacent to the hero, but any friendly unit. This, I think, works like a ability that the feudal have. I think they get something when they stand next to each other, but I believe that is extra damage. And then, gosh, there may be something like that for one of the society traits or factions that I'm forgetting, but that sounds generally pretty good. Not only do you get extra defense, you get extra resistance, so it's good against physical damage and magic damage. The offensive formation is a different option. You can't take both defensive formation and offensive formation. You have to make a choice between if I'm going to be harder to kill or if I'm going to do more damage. And I think 10% more damage is equivalent to basically 1 point of armor. If the enemy has split damage, then I think it's actually like you're protecting yourself from, well, probably an equivalent amount, about 10%. Champions of War will have an extra crit chance when this unit in particular will have extra crit chance when standing next to adjacent friendly units. So it's not like an army leader thing. It goes underneath the offensive training. So this is the one that's about doing damage. The one that goes with the defensive formation is going to be Champion of Perseverance. This unit gains extra status resistance when adjacent to friendly units. Is that better than crit chance? I guess, yeah, it's not bad. Actually, being able to resist frozens and other things like that can be quite good. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because my power cut out for a second. So yeah, let's go down a little bit and see what's next. I think we're ready to move on past the like mortal champion part of the level up tree. They were talking a little bit about the warrior tree versus the defender tree at one point. I think Tom said that the left tree of the warriors focused on charge attacks, whereas the right side is more on boosting damage and other interactions that would be for an offensively focused warrior. While the warriors are allowed to equip shields, I don't believe the defender class is allowed to um, is allowed to equip charge weapons. They're mostly for the shield interactions and being tanks on the battlefield. So a lot of their level up things give extra retaliations, which wouldn't work quite as fairly on charge weapons. Giving charge weapons extra retaliations allows their really big single action attack to allow them to do pretty crazy amounts of damage on their retaliations. So this makes a lot of sense to me that um, they basically gave you the ability to pick cooler level ups, but they limited how many things they can interact with, just to make sure things didn't get too wild when it comes to the interactions between weapons and certain abilities. Now, more specifically for the warrior class, we get a little bit of information about the first thing here. It says you get defense and HP if you take this one, and then that would be incompatible with the berserk. I think prepared charge would be this thing underneath the knight and the berserker options, and then from there you can choose either a guarded charge. Where is his mouse? Oh, his mouse is over here on the left. Never mind. Prepared charge is the one all the way on the left here. These are the charge attacks. And then guarded charge is the one that's leftmost. It says you enter defense mode after a charge attack. It can be very good if you have certain things that like give you extra stats when you go into defense mode, or just generally pretty good because when you're in defense mode you can't be flanked, and when you're charging that can put you in some pretty tricky spots close to the enemy. Brutal charge is a choice that you can make. You can either take charged guarded charge or you can take brutal charge. And brutal charge says that you'll displace the target unit and move to its hex. You'll also inflict sunder. So you can make it so that your charge guy is even better at charging, or you can make it so that they're more likely to survive and be able to continue charging on future turns. After that, I took a screenshot of Berserker. We can actually see what that says. It says melee attacks gain plus 10% and you gain 10 maximum HP. That's pretty similar to Knight. One gives you defense, one gives you damage. They both give you 10 maximum HP. So if you wanted to, you can go for the more support things, or you can make them more of like the focus of combat by going for the class level of tree. Second wind is their replacement for sprint. Okay, this makes sense. This is what I was remembering. You get extra hex of movement. It's a free action, and you get slippery so that you can avoid retaliations. You can move into bushes more easily. You can do a lot of stuff. The fact that you get extra HP is massive because that wasn't on sprint beforehand. This also says this ability is reusable after each kill, which I completely missed, and I love that so much because it just makes sense with the second wind abilities. Like a second wind for me is when I'm getting tired at the end of the day and then I just find extra energy because I've continued working. I think in a battlefield it would make sense that you'd get like an extra boost of energy after taking out an enemy. Um, what else do we have here? Apparently this screenshot was not very useful. I didn't get any text on that one. There's a sundering strikes that will make it so that your base melee and ranged attacks will have a 60% chance of inflicting sundering defense, and you get demolisher. I don't feel like that's particularly good. I don't think that's particularly good, especially when I consider it that you could be taking keen edge instead of it. It's a choice between keen edge and sundering strikes, where keen edge is just extra crit chance, and then it leads you to other stuff that's incredibly strong, incredibly powerful. I think I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, this critical momentum is very nice because it allows you to get extra healing when you're dealing a bunch of extra damage. So it's like good for you, bad for the enemy, all at the same time. Hasten should give you extra retaliations and movement. And let's see. This comes at the cost of execute. Execute's another thing that's like I think a free action. Yeah, it's a free action thing that can kill an enemy. This is kind of like the assassinate ability. So you can either have something that should trigger relatively often and will be pretty good, or you can take like a pretty big dice roll that sometimes is fantastic and sometimes you just hate yourself for not taking the other thing. So I like this. This should be an interesting choice. Um, Now we have some things for the defender class. This is the sentinel level up. This will give you extra 20% damage on retaliation attacks and opportunity attacks. There's a slight difference between a retaliation versus opportunity. Opportunity is when somebody walks by and one of your friendly units in zone of control. Retaliatory is like when they attack you. I think they both use the single like sword icon. So like if you take one opportunity attack from an enemy, they'll have one less retaliation, which can make it a little bit confusing. Um, Now, leadened blows will make it so that you can apply slowed. I think slow is going to be a very popular effect based on some of the changes we're seeing here. It should really, really limit people's ability to engage the enemy, especially when you have the bushes applying slowed as well. Of course, once a unit's slowed, they are slowed. I don't think you can get multiple things as slowed to make it so they move less far. Could be cool if that was the thing, but also it would mean certain people just get locked down. They don't get to do anything. Um, yeah, extra damage isn't bad. Effects being increased for non-repeating attacks seems super nice. I don't know how much higher percent chance you can apply on slow, but I guess maybe they could take it to 95 or 100 because you can reduce 100% to under 100%. Yeah, because I know there's things that give you 100%, 120% to like insane or pacify things. I know specifically there's something in here about pacifying that does a 100%, 120% chance to do that. We'll talk about that more when it does come up though. The fighter frontline looks to be like around the top on the top left. You get extra defense and resistance against non-flanking attacks. So if somebody's flanking you, this guy's more vulnerable, but if not, they should be able to tank quite efficiently, quite effectively, especially if you get the right gear. I think those are pretty happy because they got a pretty nice shield to go on their defender, like right at the very beginning of the game in the first 10 turns, definitely. Pushing attack is also something underneath the defender. This says strikes an enemy unit, knocking them back and dealing damage. Enter defense mode after use. This reminds me a lot of that charge attack that displaces things, but this is for a a defensive unit. It allows a defensive unit to act a little bit more like an offensive unit if you want it to have that ability. It's neat that has it only requires a single action, and it is a cooldown one. That should allow you to use it fairly often to do a pretty significant amount of damage while also putting yourself in a good position to um, to protect yourself. If you're in defense mode, it's a lot easier to protect yourself from things like flanking attacks. Shield Bearer says that when entering defense mode, this unit and all adjacent allies get extra defense. That's the physical defense, not the magical defense. And this occurs at the beginning of your uh no, this occurs when you enter defense mode and it'll last until the start of next turn. So you may want to apply this to units before they get into retaliation strikes or positions where they're going to be in danger. Um, might might be a little bit weird to get used to, but I like it. I think that should be pretty fun, pretty balanced. And then resistant vanguard is similar to this one, but it's not just about resisting damage. It's about resisting status effects, which is probably better. In general, there's a lot of very scary status effects, and whatever source of status resistance you can get, you generally want. So I think yeah, if you're going defender class, maybe you're gonna want the extra status resistance, not just on this unit, but the friendly units. And this seems to be not just it applies it when the unit goes into defense mode. It's just when people are next to it. So you probably want to keep this guy near your friendly units at the end of your turn versus this one could be or should be theoretically easier to use and apply. So the offensive vanguard says this unit and friendly units gain 10% more damage. That sounds pretty good. Probably easier just to apply that boost to rangers to get the most damage out of. But maybe you can actually make it so that this unit moves next to a melee unit that could have almost killed an enemy, but once you do that, then they get an extra 10% more damage, and that's good for you. I feel like actually you may not need to end your turn to apply that 10% damage. So you can actually keep moving him down a line of melee units. That could be very good. That could be very, very good. A lot of micro and a lot of thinking, but I don't know. You don't need to. You don't have to if you don't want to. Taunt, I believe that makes sense here for the defender right at the top, something that you can get access to early on. This will make it so that people will want to attack the hero. This is very good on certain tier 1 units. I don't know if I'd want to lock down my hero by taunting an enemy into it, but I could see if you put the right tools on your guy that this would be very good on like high damaging units or something that you're a little bit worried about. Maybe it's not the damage you're worried about, maybe it's the stat effects, but if they're taunted, they won't use their thing as efficiently or maybe at all. Warded armor sounds very nice. This unit has +3 resistance against magic attacks. It looks like it comes into play a couple lines down the tree, so it's something you can't get immediately, and it would be at the cost of the reinforced armor, which has to be +3 armor against physical attacks. I don't see it immediately here. Maybe they didn't show it off, but I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Stunning bash is, yeah, this is 120% to apply stat specs. Like I mentioned earlier, you can reduce something under this 120%. You can reduce it by 30%, and then the unit is basically taking a 90% dice roll to see if it's stunned or not. Not only do you stun, you go into defense mode. It's only cooldown 1. That seems pretty amazing, but it also is once again not at the top of the tree. This is something that you have to take a few things in order to get to. I love all these connections. It looks really interesting. I'm not entirely sure I'm understanding everything, but it looks like if you wanted to get to like this icon, you can take this path probably to get to it, or you can take the one down here. Already looking at the time and noticing we're 42 minutes into this recording and only about halfway through the document, so I'm going to pick up pace a little bit here. The tomes are no longer giving hero skills. Seems like a really, really big change. It used to be every tome would give you some hero skill that you could choose when you were leveling up. Now none of the tomes give you that, and that's mostly because it's incompatible with the system. It wasn't balanced, and a lot of those things ended up getting moved into the signature skill trees or other parts of the class skill trees. But yeah, I don't think we got to see much more about that. We just heard them talk a little bit about that design choice at one point in the stream. The new punch weapon does an AoE on its third attack that works not only for the rulers and the heroes, but for the new monk unit. The new monk unit, when they do their third attack, they do a AoE that does 12 spirit damage to the target and adjacent enemies. That's really good damage channel, and it's a lot of damage. So I really love this. I think that it makes it so that you want to get triple attacks. Um, even more than you already did. And if you can set it up so that you're resetting units, giving the action points to give them the triple attacks, that could be pretty fun and look really cool. I think the animations they chose for the punching animations are amazing, and it's going to be something that um, I'm going to try and play around a little bit with too. Next, we have a little bit of stuff from the very beginning here. This is a new trait that you can pick at the very beginning. Morale gains are increased by 50%. It's kind of like the opposite of cold-blooded, saying morale loss is reduced by 50%. So this could be a great way to get more crits or to counteract morale losses by getting morale gains that are quite significant. Then we also have, I think, Land of Conflict appeared for a quick second. This is basically we get accursed fiends, and the prosperity units are more common. So that's what they're playing on, and we have seen a few accursed fiends and a few of the prosperity units, but not all of them. An unfolding mystery looks like this says, in this realm, intrigue and skullduggery are rampant. The intrigue happening type has a higher chance of occurring during the mid game, and then a diverse set of rulers will increase the chance of occurrence. So they're, I guess, encouraging you to get more rulers, or they'll just kind of pick from a list of very different types of rulers to allow different intrigue events to occur. The ogre can also have this inner fire, which is uh, one of 3 very similar new things. Inner fire will give you extra fire resistance, and then when people attack the guy who has the inner fire, the attacker will take damage. It's kind of like poisonous, but instead of applying damage at the end of the turn, it's just like they take damage when they make the attack, which can actually stop attacks. It can make it so somebody who had 3 attacks and only 1 health will take their first attack, take an attack retaliation, and now be it. They won't take 2 more attacks because the or maybe even if the enemy doesn't have attack retaliation, even if it's a support, then they would die and they wouldn't be able to finish their attack because of this basically 3 points of fire damage. Inner frost must work the same way, just with frost resistance and deals frost damage to melee attackers. And inner lightning, I think, works the same way, gives you lightning resistance and deals lightning damage when the guys attack. I think out of all of these, lightning resistance is probably, or yeah, lightning resistance and lightning damage is probably the most valuable because it's just a generally useful damage channel against a lot of different things. Like constructs are super weak to lightning, but also ethereal things are weak to lightning. And the new Eldritch Sovereign, I think he was weak to lightning because he was ethereal as well. Strong, I think they said, is slightly stronger. I don't think anybody was picking this because basically it was just +2 physical damage. Now it says non-repeating melee and physical attacks deal +4 physical damage. I believe that's better than it used to be. I don't think they just changed the text based on what they said, but it could have been that they didn't. We're all just, I'm remembering it wrong. They were remembering it wrong. There's a lot of things that changed in this game all the time, especially in between the big DLCs. Oathsworn is the new culture. They have higher draft. They swear devotion to uh, uh, one of these, either nature, order, or chaos, or rather harmony, righteousness, and strife. Harmony, this is stuff that was covered in the dev diary, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. I'm just going to try and mention the stuff that wasn't covered in the dev diary. This says you get relations with free cities and rulers when vassalizing. You They start at the vassalage phase instead of tributary. So it just it's better for, this is for conquered cities. This will make it so that the conquered cities are more loyal to you and less likely to want to break off and cause problems. The culture units have harmonized, which I think got, yeah, I got this screenshot here, which says basically when you are following what they want to do, you're going to get temporary health points when they drop below 60% of their health points. And if you aren't doing what they want to do, if you're not being like in harmony with the world around you, then your units are going to have less damage potential for 3 turns after they drop to 60% of their HP. There's a lot of requirements in order to trigger these things, and they change a lot based off of your devotion. This one gains devotion by having city or vassals of another race. They also get it when they clear infestation and ancient wonders, when they make a truce, or forgiving a grievance. So if there's somebody on the map creating grievances, you can just forgive them for like most of the devotion you need. Is it each grievance gives you 5 points? No, that can't be right. That gives then you just um, forgive 20 grievances and you're almost at max whatchamacallit, devotion. Yeah, I think Paragon requires like 120 points. Devotee was I think 70 points, and Adherent I think was 20 points of devotion. It's something like that, something close to that. Um, yeah, I think from here we can move on to the other choices you get for the new oathsworn culture. So righteousness says negative alignment things are gained, or rather are doubled. You gain twice as much negative alignment when you take negative alignment choices. They have something called nobility, and nobility is basically extra spirit damage. I think you start off at neutral, so you already have some spirit damage. +2 is not nothing. These effects are increased for non-repeating attacks is awesome, so you can get to +10 spirit damage on non-repeating attacks like the Mage Lock Rifle after you get a lot of devotion. Devotion for these guys is gained by getting good alignment. Every point of good alignment gives you 1 point of devotion. Every point of negative alignment gets you less devotion. It takes you closer and closer to being an Oathbreaker. And the Oathbreaker for these guys are just 20% less damage. So you really want to avoid that. It's a lot worse than I would say being weakened. Now, I think there may have been something above this that says when these are triggered. I think they just happen for this faction. Um, Now, we can see a little bit more about strife here. This says basically base attacks deal extra damage when the attacker is outnumbered based on the culture's devotion. So outnumbered is when the enemy has more ability to fight, and I think that this damage potential on your attacks it doesn't show up until you're outnumbered. So it might be that after you get into the battle, you actually have more army strength. Or is outnumbered not army strength? It might be just number of units. I could be wrong about that. It might be number of units. But yeah, this generally seems pretty good, but not quite as strong as the righteousness one. I think the righteous one might be a little bit harder to achieve and have better effects. But the strife one also definitely has some interesting things going for it. You're supposed to attack strong players, and you get a lot of devotion from just declaring war. This says you gain devotion by entering war. Yeah, that's the main way you do it. If you raise a city, that's quite a bit of devotions. If you don't let units rout in events, if you take the fight, which a lot of people do, you get devotion. As long as you win a combat, you'll get some devotion, depending on if you have higher army power or lower army power than the enemy. And of course, you don't want to make peace with people or vassalage or lose an owned city. I think losing an owned city is going to be one of the most common ways for strife to lose devotion, and I think they're probably the most likely to reach Oathbreaker based off of the interactions I'm seeing here. And Oathbreaker is minus 20% damage regardless of being outnumbered. That looks like it's just going to be the case for combat for you if you are an Oathbreaker. So yeah, quite bad. Quite bad. You really want to avoid Oathbreaker if you can. I kind of wish there was an Oathbreaker strategy that was actually viable, but I also get it. I think that that's the theme, is that you want to actually follow your oaths. Um, Adherent gives plus 10 city stability. So just having a little bit of devotion was not just giving them the extra damage, but it was also having an economic impact. It was making it so that, yeah, you get more resources from your city. So our next set of screenshots here have to do with the Tome of Discipline, which looks like a very nice new tome. The fact that you can dispel on a single target all of its negative status effects on a tier 1 tome is super nice. I know a lot of people were taking the Tome of Alchemy and the Tome of Souls because they gave you access to dispel. So just having one more choice that gives you dispel will, I think, really open up the game and give other builds a lot more viability. So there's other things in here that I like that are really good. It's not just that. You have the transformation here, which makes it so that your guys are going to have extra status resistance. As you know from earlier, I'm a giant fan of status resistance. The extra healing in combat is pretty massive too. So this is, it's not the best part of the tome, but it's quite good if you're able to get this up and running on a build that relies on healing. Focus aim is something that we didn't really get a great screenshot from, but we can assume how it generally works based off other interactions that are in the game. This will allow the unit to make an attack that cannot miss. I think that might be a free action that you can only use like once per combat, or it might be something with a cooldown that uh, doesn't end your turn. Um, or it might end your turn and allow you to make that attack next turn. I'm not entirely sure exactly how that works, but I like the idea of focused aim and not missing certain attacks. If you really need something to land from far away, boosting the accuracy can be very, very useful. All right, so this is my second attempt at recording this part of the video where we go over empowered strikes. I noticed after recording it that I got a very important detail here incorrect. This says the third attack in a turn has a 60% base chance of inflicting stun for one turn, which is not as good as having that stun chance on every attack in a repeating attack, but still quite strong. Still potentially very, very nice. The fact that you get extra physical damage on your attacks is also very good. And I think if you combine this with something like an Anvil Guard or a Spell Shield, who have inherently sources of freezing the enemy or stunning the enemy, then you're going to be able to lock down a lot of armies very efficiently with this enchantment on those types of units, the ones that have inherent things that remove actions away from the enemy. The other really interesting thing about this being on the third attack means that if you're going on the offense, you generally have to move, which makes it very hard to get 3 attacks off of a single unit against an enemy unit. You might move forward and be able to get 2 repeating attacks or a single action attack, but it's pretty tricky to get 3. I think the new monk unit, which I haven't gone over in this video, it has the ability to jump forward and then you can get 3 attacks, but that's very unique. I think there's a new thing called command or coordinate that also resets action points, so that could be another way to allow you to go on the offense and still get 3 attacks and still get the stun chance off of this interaction. But yeah, generally speaking, this is going to favor people in defensive formations and people who are trying to get the enemy to come to them before they go in for their attacks. And yeah, and now we can move on to the Discord messages. This says basically somebody was asking about the cooldowns on Dragon Breath, and Jordy just said no and yes, that's changed. And Avoxel came in here and gave us a lot more details. He said that the Order Dragons are going to have the Defender um, class. The Chaos Dragons are going to be Warrior class. Astral Dragon will be a Mage class. Materium Dragon will be Defender class. Nature Dragon will be Ritual class. And Shadow Dragon will be a Warrior class. and after that they gave us a little bit more intel on what that actually means. So like when you go to create a ruler, you can usually pick a weapon, but if you're going for the dragon rulers, it's a breath type, or the dragon's affinity. If you choose the nature one, you're only going to get the ritualist hero class as an option. From what I can tell here, that seems to be what it's saying. You get a nature affinity point, and your breath and claw weapons deal blight. There's more associated with the dragons, like their transformations, and gosh, actually, I think that may be the main one that I'm thinking of. Oh, right, and the ores was something that they used to get from the levels up that would be affected by this decision. There may be more that I'm forgetting about, but it's really neat that they're giving this intel right now. We also have this new unit, the Monk, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, but we didn't look at the leap ability. We only looked briefly at the meditate. The as we talked about earlier, the melee strike isn't nothing. This is actually quite a bit of damage for repeating, and then at the end of it, it does another 12 damage. So very, very strong if you can get this guy to get 3 attacks in, and its ability to leap will make that a lot easier to do. You'll be able to leap 2 spaces forward and get that combo in relatively easily, as long as the enemy comes close to your monk on the turn before. But even if they don't, I think the ability to leap into the back line and get next to support units is very nice. If you can place 2 of these on 2 sides of the support, they literally can't run away because they're just going to get stuck in zone of control. We did talk a little bit about meditate. That's awesome that these guys have a healing ability, a leap ability, and a pretty amazing offensive strike. After that, we have a tome SBI that has to go with the Tome of Discipline. This is the monastery. It gives you stability, draft, and then for each farm around you, you get more stability and draft. So not bad, pretty good in general, I would say. We also have this thing called culture stance. This is a culture tech that you can get, I think, at the beginning of the game. Friendly units in a 1 hex radius gain, they get first strike and extra retaliation and defensive masters. And defensive masters, if I remember correctly, puts you in defense mode. Yeah, it says right here, puts you in defense mode at the end of your turn. That's very nice, because that means that you can attack and then be relatively safe too. So this just seems very good, and in certain situations, if you can put enough melee units near each other, the first strike is really good, the extra retaliation is really good, and then defensive master will allow them to protect each other if they have like warding or anything like that. Also, just like we talked about earlier, avoid flanking attacks, which is a giant source of damage in Age of Wonders. We have devout radiance here, which says enemies in a 1 hex radius get 10 spirit damage, and then this can go up to, I think, 36 spirit damage for Paragon. The damage changes based on your devotion level, so it may not seem like a lot right now, but it is a whole 1 hex radius. It's not a single target, and that can actually be scaled up quite significantly. What's 36 times 7? Well, it's more than 100 damage, quite a bit more than 100 damage, and only for 10 mana, 15 casting points. That's very good. That's very, very nice value. Tome of Shadows came up towards the end of the stream. This first one, the Rending Shadows, says enemies in a 1 hex radius are going to take 16 physical damage, have a chance to be blind, and have a chance to have sundering defense. That might not seem amazing at a glance, but a lot of things in this tome actually really benefit from targets being blind. So this is a great way to just apply that blind relatively consistently to a lot of units while also getting some value out of it. Maybe you just need to deal a little bit of damage to one unit and you want to blind the others so that it's easier to deal damage to them too. This is a good way to get damage and to make it easier to apply damage on other units. I want to say Living Shadows here seems pretty good here. Yeah, Living Shadows is the one that gives you extra evasion. It says something about 3 hexes the attacker has something blind for a turn. So I think Living Shadows is the idea that if these guys get struck, then the guys that are standing nearby them are going to become blind, which will make it harder for them to land, I think, ranged attacks, and it takes away their ability to retaliate. So it's easier to engage them on the next turn if that's what you want to do with the blind effect. But there's also this interaction right here, which is massive. This used to just be ignores 50% of target's defenses and resistance, but then they decided that was way too strong, kind of breaks the game. So they made it so that the targets have to be blind, and there's a lot of things in this tome that applies blind. Blind used to be one of the side effects I didn't love a lot, but you know, you could find some utility in blinding certain high value targets and avoiding retaliations from that um, through the blind. Now, I can't remember there was much else in this tome they showed off. I think there was something they never got to. They didn't get to Shade Network, and they did get to this unit, but there may be some aspects of this they were still missing. Like I said, I'm not sure if I get everything behind Living Shadows. So I did mention earlier that he has this range attack. He does that little combat rule. He inflicts blind, and like we talked about earlier, a lot of things in this tome really like it when targets become blind. So this could be kind of a way to make it so you deal more damage through your guys that have this enchantment. It's not transformation, it's enchantment. So it looks like melee guys basically get that. Says makes base melee attacks of enchanted units. Yes, it's not for rangers, it's for the melee strike. So even though it looks like you can't go in skirmishers, it doesn't go in the skirmishers ranged attacks. So like for example, this throw shadow dagger, that wouldn't be able to get the shadow blade bypass or ignore defense and resistance. But its fatal strike being a melee strike, that should be able to get that modifier or that effect. And this says that the damage increases based on the target's lost HP. It's already dealing quite a bit of damage at 25 points, but I have to imagine that gets to be quite a lot of damage if you're dealing, if you're attacking something that's lost, I don't know, 70% of its HP. If you're dealing with a higher tier unit, this might be a really good way to pick off those guys because already have so much HP, and it can be kind of hard to um, take away all that HP in a turn or two to get enough value out of putting all of that damage onto the target. But if you have enough shades, I could see that being a little bit easier to do. I remember them saying Shadowed Escape is a little bit like Slip Away. They didn't actually hover over it, but I believe it says something like when this unit gets low on HP, it teleports to a different hex and then probably becomes a little bit harder to hit. Or maybe it blinds the guys that were standing next to it. Okay, so now we're going back to some screenshots from way at the very beginning of the stream where they showed off the new UI for character creation. I do love this. I don't love it as much as the changes to mechanics, but I think that this is going to be really nice for considering the different things that you can make or the different ways you can make your character look. Um, it was a little annoying having to click through this to see what your options were versus just having them all here in a visual. The warrior start apparently has a couple different weapons that you can take. You don't have to take the cestus. You can take the flaming great club and probably something else. Right here, we're only seeing one option for the ritualist, one option for the ranger, one two options for the defender. But it's possible that a lot more can be unlocked through the pantheon, and they're just not all here. Um, just wanted to mention that uh, uh, since as we saw it, purging staff sounds pretty good actually. When I look at these, I'm like, oh yeah, purging is removing staff effects. I like doing that. It could be quite good. The new grace mechanic is something that I mentioned earlier, but I think I actually have a screenshot of these details here. Target friendly unit gains a bit of grace. This is something that actually you can get through the new Graceful Judge Mounts. It looks like this will basically make it so that there's a free action ability here to make it so that guys get the grace or the 10 HP heal. Wow, did I really not hover over it at any point? I thought there was. I could have sworn at one point we got to see that it heals you 10 HP when you take damage. But let's see, is there any other WWs over here? I think that's like the main one. The Pegasus mounts came from the heraldry, um, Heralds of Glory or something like that. So it came out recently, but not a lot of people have seen it, or not everybody has seen it. Blessed Dragon mounts, I think, are like the Eagle mounts. They work, I think, mechanically the same way. They make your guys flying. They reduce the number of models in. I think there may be some other things. It like gives you extra vision on the world map, but none of that's really reflected in here. Just as they become flying. It seems like it'll be cool to have another unit type that will be in the loot tables that can fly, because is always awesome when you can get like a mount from an event that allows your guys to get to other places quickly. The training hall replaces the market for the oathsworn. So the oathsworn get more draft. So instead of getting gold out of gold structure, they get gold and a little bit of draft. Let's see what else we have here. There's a culture SBI, the School of Mastery. This says that units produced in this city start with +1 starting rank, and you can get extra mana and gold. I think the source of this is the Oathsworn. I don't remember seeing this in the game beforehand, but I could be mistaken because I don't see the source listed there. The um, loot table here, the reward thing that you see when you clear something now has a new disenchant button to make it easier for you to say, I don't like any of this loot, just give me the binding essence so I can make my own stuff in the forge. They also Tom said they went through the drop tables and tried to balance it so things are a little bit more fair. There isn't some drops that are just amazing and some drops that are kind of like meh and boring. After that, we have a couple things from the Oathsworn roster, which they've already talked a little bit about. I've already talked a little bit about, so we won't spend too much time looking at this stuff. The heal here, this is really good. Friendly units in a 1 hex radius get 25 HP back. That's a really big heal. It's only cooldown 2, so you can actually keep units alive pretty effectively with this. I'm not sure if it's too good, if you could take it down to 15 HP, or if that would be too weak compared to all the things that can deal damage. But then again, there's a lot of ways to heal now with this new grace mechanic, so maybe it makes sense like that. Purging Blast is just their normal attack. This says target unit sustains damage and has 1 positive status effect removed. So you can get rid of things that are making the enemy better just by using your primary attack. I think the High Culture's ability to awaken their support to distract an enemy to make it so that they'll take 25% more damage is a lot better, but this guy isn't really an offensive unit. He's more of he is a full support. He's somebody who's supposed to heal the other guys and remove their status effects pretty effectively. The Underblade single action attack is similar to charge, puts you in defense mode. It has higher maintenance like the Mercs, so it's got better stats. I feel like from the stream, um, Tom was thinking that these guys are maybe a little bit too good and that they need to be nerfed a bit. And based off of that screenshot I showed you earlier was something I saw on Reddit, the comparison between this unit's damage and the tier 4 or 5. I think based off of that, they may end up nerfing this a little bit just so that it works slightly differently. But I like this in theory. I like that we have a fighter unit at tier 1 that should be pretty useful. Somebody mentioned that this should be something you can put on mounted. On mounts, so it'll be like having a charge unit that can move 48 movement relatively easily. I love that in theory. I think that'll be really, really fun to play around with, but haven't tried it yet, so don't really know. Pole arms come with Sundering Strike. They're pretty basic as a pole arm. I think the main tier 1 you're gonna want is Honor Blades. I'm probably gonna be spamming those out for damage potential and then trying to support them with other guys as much as possible. The new battle mage has seal abilities that depend on your devotion or your subculture basically. Since they took the chaos strife one, they have fire here, and this is a very very cool unit. These things cannot miss targets who have Seal of Fire applied to them, and the Seal of Fire already does a bunch of damage. So this is a great way to take out high value targets that have lots of HP. If you can have one of these guys apply a Seal of Fire and then the other one to follow up, I think you're gonna deal a lot of damage to them. But then again, you may just do Seal of Fire one turn and then the primary attack the next turn. Um, yeah, it's not just like a normal burn too. It does 35 damage and then 12 points of fire damage at the end of their turn. I wonder if you can apply burning and seal of fire. I would assume you can. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. And of course, the scouts, they get the extra fire damage that you get from devotion. So these guys can be slightly more useful in combat, although I generally probably still won't use them too often because they'll just die and then you'll be out of the ability to scout as easily. And I think we're getting to the end here. These are the accursed ogres that actually came up relatively early in the stream. These guys are like the old fiends. The old fiends are now called infernal fiends, and I don't know if their tags actually make them any different. but it looks like this guy's weak to lightning, which I don't think the other fiends were. So that's probably one of the main differences that we have here. Um, this charge strike inflicts ghost fire. It displaces and replaces. This guy's very threatening because accursed body basically makes it so that they apply ghost fire to people who attack them. I have to imagine armored accursed armors works a lot like this, if not exactly like this, because it just makes a lot of sense thematically that they would have something like this that you can fight on the map that works like something that you can put on your units after you get to tier 4 tomes, I want to say. Yeah, that was a tier 4 tome. The Blessed Dragon has a heal that also applies grace. Friendly units in a 1 hex radius get the 15 HP. And here we go, we finally have the picture. It's right at the very end. Grace says heals 10 temporary HP and removes 1 stack of grace. So I guess you can't get all 50 of those HP back after having 5 stacks. I think it'd just be 10 HP per attack, which is interesting. I missed that at my first glance and in the streams. Numbers pop up. They move by pretty quickly. I guess I wasn't looking that closely at them. And is that it? Oh no, we have the Radiant Guardian. He came up for a little bit. I like his design. Look, he's got like a face on his back. I want to know more about his story. I'm sure there is a little story behind this unit design. I love him. Now, Radiant transposition is really cool. I misread this the first time. I thought it was transmutation or something like this. Transposition means move. So they're swapping positions with a friendly unit, and the enemies adjacent to that unit will take damage and have a 60% chance of being pacified. This is really good. You'll run a friendly unit that you want to use to probably attack somebody, maybe charge into a high value target. Then you'll switch positions with that unit and have this guy pacify that unit and other units, hopefully using the radiant transposition. It is a bit of a risk. 60% isn't that likely to work, but when it works, it's going to be very good. It's going to be very, very good. Of course, you have to swap with a friendly unit. This isn't just a teleport, so yeah, keep that all in mind. 8 spirit damage isn't a whole lot. And did we get to see its melee strike if it does anything special? I don't think we did. Yeah, that's everything I have here in terms of screenshots. If you feel like I missed anything, if you wanted to add anything to the discussion, make sure you let me know in the comment section below. I'll see you around. Have a good one.